Now, I think the beauty of resistance, whether it's conscious or unconscious, is once we're able to identify it either in the moment or later in hindsight, it can become one of our greatest teachers. When we see ourselves resisting, we know there's something to learn by either overriding it or asking ourselves the hard questions about why it's showing up. Welcome to Journeys Through Change, a podcast that inspires women to let go of the fear and say yes to possibility. I'm your host, Noelle Van, an author, creator, and empowerment coach who spent years in corporate America helping innovators and leaders ride the waves of change with ease and grace. I now work with women to step into change and unleash the power they have to create a life they love. Whether you're contemplating a change in your career, relationship, health, lifestyle, or anything in between, nothing's off the table. I'll be offering up simple insights to help you manage the ups and downs of change and sharing interviews with successful women who took a leap of faith to create the life they knew they were meant to live, sharing their wisdom, advice, and all the juicy lessons they learned along the way. So get cozy in your favorite comfy chair and let's get started. I've been wanting to bring up this topic for a while now because I feel like it's surfaced quite a few times in my life, and I'm starting to see it in greater clarity now, which is always a good time, I think, to share some learning. This with the caveat that I obviously do not have all the answers, but a few insights are always helpful. Now, it's a feeling I think all of us have had experience with, and that is resistance. Now, I feel like even the word resistance has an energy that feels a bit closed and restrictive. Even saying it doesn't feel that easy to say. I think resistance can be experienced consciously and unconsciously, so sometimes it can be a bit tricky and difficult to recognize. Conscious resistance is something we can be aware of that can show up on a consistent basis or just from time to time. But we typically know it when we see it and often choose to ignore it or find a way to justify why it's there. I spent a great deal of time in conscious resistance in early sobriety. I was always fighting one thing or another, fearful of taking on this new life in recovery that felt scary and uncomfortable. Half the time I was irritated and angry that I even had this problem to deal with, and especially grumpy about having the misfortune of actually having to let people know about it. Sharing something that I felt so personal and had so much shame tacked onto it, especially in the beginning, that I would have just rather not had to tell anybody. So as I started down this road, stepping into a completely new lifestyle and slowly growing into what I see now to be an entirely different person on so many levels, I stayed in a place of resistance for quite a while, almost righteously so. I felt like I had the right to be pissy about the position that I had somehow found myself in, not fully acknowledging my part in all of it. And it actually felt good for a while, until it didn't. I think when we make a change that's that transformative, that hasn't shown us its significance yet, it can feel like nothing more than a colossal inconvenience. And we kind of white knuckle it until something finally moves us to release the tension and accept it for what it is. My resistance gave way as I began to expect more of myself and take on new interests. And soon this new life started to emerge, allowing me to loosen my grip and gradually ease into it. Now, I will say, as I reached out to others going through similar experiences, I began to feel part of a greater community, and that was a game changer for me. I was developing courage and curiosity about my life, and I didn't think I had actually ever felt that way up until that point. When I look back on that time, I felt very conscious of my resistance. I don't think I wore it like a badge, but I definitely could recognize it happening within me. Now, when you look at resistance for what it is, it's nothing more than a stubbornness that stems from fear. It can show up as anger or anxiety or manipulation, all in an effort for us to stay safe and comfortable. As I became more and more okay with being a sober person, I developed more inner strength and my ability to overcome the resistance felt a lot easier. Or so I thought. What started to happen after that became very interesting. My conscious experience of resistance faded away, but my unconscious resistance was still there. Now, for me, it came in the form of never fully owning my sobriety. I had basically written a book about it. I had been coaching other women in addiction recovery for several years. And funny enough, it wasn't until I was working with someone who was helping me to get started with my social media that it reared its ugly head. Now, I will say I have always had a love-hate relationship with social media, and I think it pushes more buttons for me than I care to admit. But she was recommending I put something out there about my sobriety on full display that at the time felt way out of my comfort zone. What I told myself at the time was it was painting a really stark image of my experience in addiction, which to me just didn't feel true. Now, mind you, I knew by how I reacted to her with an emphatic no that this was an area I had not really worked through yet. I'd felt I'd come so far, but this clearly needed to be looked into further. And in doing so, I came to realize a few things. Number one, I was still in corporate America at the time and had a huge fear of what others would think of me and how I performed in my job. If I had addiction as part of my past, what would they think, right? And number two, the reality was I still had a huge chip on my shoulder about truly owning my sobriety and accepting it for what it was, which, by the way, was exactly the truth she was asking me to reveal. A pretty dark and scary and out of control part of my life that I just didn't feel ready to reveal yet. Now, I think the beauty of resistance, whether it's conscious or unconscious, is once we're able to identify it either in the moment or later in hindsight, it can become one of our greatest teachers. When we see ourselves resisting, we know there's something to learn by either overriding it or asking ourselves the hard questions about why it's showing up. Now, I often ask my clients, what do they want? When we talk about making a shift in their life, I'll ask them this question all the time. And often they have a really hard time answering it. And this to me is a sure sign that they're experiencing some form of resistance. Maybe because as soon as they may get it, they won't necessarily know what to do with it, or may not necessarily really want it. And that subtle resistance to change or to taking on something new will continue to be there unless or until we are willing to see it and say, oh, yep, I recognize you. You're the obstacle I placed in my own path, and then step on over it and do it anyway. Now, I want to leave you with a few tips on overcoming resistance in the moment. First, recognize it for what it is. Don't resist recognizing resistance. See how that sounds? Kind of strange, but it really is our go-to place. Feeling resistance can often feel like we're copping out or taking the low road. So it's not something we're willing to really take on and own. Now, the second is just to sit with it. When you feel yourself resisting something, I can guarantee you the answer for why is likely something you already know. Taking a breath and exploring where it's coming from will get you there sooner or later and will ultimately bring you to a place of greater understanding. Yes, this also may involve asking yourself some uncomfortable questions, but in the long run, a willingness to give yourself the grace to have the setbacks will only help you overcome them sooner. Lastly, be open to taking on a different perspective. Is your resistance based on fear or misunderstanding? And if so, what's the real truth behind it? We tend to tell ourselves stories, especially around resistance. So I just invite you to question them and dig a bit deeper into what may be causing them. The beautiful thing about these moments of clarity and self-awareness is we create them by remaining curious and open to learning, especially when they creep up on us out of the blue. That's when it's time to really pay attention. They are just another door opening for us to walk through to live a braver life, ultimately ready to take on the next challenge. Truth be told, resistance is a part of life, and when it shows up, it's just another reminder of how many ways we get to take a peek into our inner world and the opportunities we have to grow and gain a better understanding of ourselves each and every day. That's it for now. Until next time. Thanks for listening to the Journeys Through Change podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or really wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us and leave a review if you've enjoyed this episode. And share it with a friend or on social media to spread the good word, so more women like you can find us and join in on the fun. For more information on the podcast or Day by Day book, go to livedaybyday.com.